we have the awesome, the renowned Reverend Willie Dixon on the line. And boy, does he have a story to tell. Can't wait to hear it. Hello, Reverend Dixon.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm just fine. So thank you for agreeing to share your story with us and give us a little insight into your life and what you've done and what you are doing, because I know you're a man of action because I've seen you in action. So one of the things that we do here is we start from the beginning, because part of what we want to know is how did you get to be who you are? So where did you grow up, and tell us a little bit about how you got started on this planet.
Well, I go back as I have a capsule. I was born a long time ago. Well, on October the 3rd, I celebrated my 82nd birthday. And I was born in the South in 1931 in a small segregated town called Tampa, Florida. And Tampa during that time, it was segregated. There were different parts of town that we couldn't go to, and we would have when we go downtown, we had the black water fountain, the colored water fountain, and I always remember that my grandmother would tell me, say, if you have to go to the restroom, you better go, because you can go downtown and spend your money, but you couldn't use the restroom. And so just living in that day and age, it was something else. And the sad part about it is we as a people, we don't have an opportunity to translate some of the things that happen in our lives, because we're living in a microwave society. You know, the family used to sit together at the table and talk about different things, but now that's not so in most families, because people eat at different times, and so a lot have changed. So most of our children, say for the last 2 or 3 generations, they don't know what we had to go through to be where we are today. You know, like I told one person, I said, you know, when I was born, I said there were no televisions, there was no air conditions, and definitely there was no cell phones. So there's a lot of things that many of our young people, they think things happen by osmosis, but we had to go through a transitional period that caused me to be who I am today. And I usually tell them, I say, you know, that many of them could not have survived. We had to endure a lot of things that we didn't want to do. And, you know, they would say, well, you were, I don't know what they say, I don't know whether they call us, we were afraid or what, but no, we were overcomers. And we had to put up with things that a lot of our young people would not put up with, and you see they're dying at an early age. But here I am. And now, as I grew up in Tampa, well, my family wanted me to get a better education, so I went to live in Chicago. That was in 1944. I finished junior high school, and then I went on matriculated to Crane Tech in Chicago, Illinois. And when I was in Chicago, I graduated from Crane Tech. It was in 1950. Then I got a greeting about the service, and I knew I did not want to go into the Army. So what I did, I caught the next train coming back to Tampa, Florida. I joined the Air Force because during that time I knew, being a person of color, I would not be a pilot. So I knew I would get a soft job. So I stayed in the service. While I was in the service, I boxed for a minute. And then I played in the band. And then I stayed in the service, I think, about 6 months, and you didn't need but 9 months in order to get, it was 90 days, and you considered a veteran. So I came back to Tampa, and coming back to Tampa, I waited tables, saved up some money, and I was sitting on the porch with 2 of my late friends, Dr. Robbie Gardner and his brother Robbie, who retired from the school system. And I started to say the late. Most of the people, being 82, most of my friends are dead. But nevertheless, so they said, why don't you go to college? And I hadn't thought about it. And so Robert said, go to West Virginia, because he was a graduate of West Virginia. And then Dr. Gardner, he went to Fisk in Nashville, and then he went to Meharry Medical School. He said, you ought to go to Tennessee State. See, if you go to Tennessee State, you have a lot of foxy chicks at Fisk, and they go there in order to marry somebody from Meharry, and all of the men who are at Meharry, they have to study. So they go down to Tennessee State to party. So I ended up going to Tennessee State. I left Florida with $275 in my pocket, and I've always been a hustler. I knew how to make things happen. So I got to Tennessee State. I majored in music, which I should have majored in engineering, because I went to a technical school. But let me digress. Something happened in Chicago before I left Chicago. I on a dare of a young lady, and it's all in my book. I wrote a book, A Story to Tell. Well, this was in 1948. I had my first taste of heroin, and so I started using heroin off and on. But when I went to Tennessee State, I was drug-free. But I graduated from Tennessee State, and while I was there, I had a chance.
Hold on one second. You brought it up, so we're going to go back and explore that.
Okay.
There are two things you said so far that struck me as interesting, and I'll say both of them, and you can speak to whichever one you want. The first one, when you talked about the separate bathrooms and what have you, and the fact that you couldn't go into a restroom, that reminds me of the story that you and I both heard at the event that we were at, where the young lady was talking about how she needed to go to the bathroom and didn't know that she couldn't go, and she ended up wetting herself right there in public. And the person, what struck me as strange is that the white individual that would not allow her to go to the restroom had no problem cleaning up the mess. So, that to me was kind of bizarre. And when you talked about the heroin, that's Abra, and she talks about the naked soul and what have you. And one of the things she talks about is her addiction to drugs and how it affected her and how she got off and what it was like. And she was able to describe how horrible it was in a way that only people who've experienced that would know, because most people die from it. And so I don't know how to ask the question, because I don't want you saying anything that's going to encourage people to take drugs, but what was that experience like, and how did you overcome it?
Well, for one, I didn't like to drink alcohol, and and I disagree with some of the experts that would tell you that marijuana or reefer is the gateway to heroin or cocaine. But it was just that I was around a lot of people who were on the street who were hustlers, prostitutes, and so forth when I was living in Chicago at an early age. And in the community where I was living on the west side of Chicago, a lot of the kids I was with, they were using drugs. And then I saw the opportunity to make money, so I hustled and sold drugs and used drugs, but I was my best customer. I know I had saved up quite a bit of money, and I was going to come back to Tampa and purchase a house with my grandmother. But then, the trickster always get tricked. But anyway, the same young lady who got me started on drugs, she and the fellow who I call myself taking her away from, they crossed me and beat me out all of my money. So anyway, I left Chicago and went back to Tampa. But now, when I was in Tampa, I did toy around with drugs. The only time I didn't is when I was in college, I stayed drug free, and you see a lot of people they saw the movie, and you have to be old enough to remember the picture with Frank Sinatra, The Golden Arms. Now, you see where they went through a lot of the draws and so forth, but it is kind of rough to get off. But later, when you find out that most of the drugs are cut so that with quinine or other substance that they use, that is not pure. So, but really, how I really got off of drugs, well, I was the first school teacher, and I think in the state of Florida, to get busted for drugs, which was in 1964. And I was sentenced to 5 years. I did 3 years, 6 months, and 10 days at Avon Park. But Avon Park was like a country club. And I did my time, got out. But what happened was I went back to the same environment, and, you know, like to say, a sign of insanity if you keep doing the same thing over and over and think you'll get a different result. But I went back around the same people, so I got strung out again on drugs. And here again, I went to the judge who sentenced me. He was also a musician, so he called himself helping me, and I went to a drug center, and I went down. I tried to run the people program and got kicked out of the program. So I came back to Tampa from Pompano Beach, and this same judge, I was down in the courthouse. His name was Judge Ryder, Herbert Ryder, and he got off the bench and came in the hall of the courthouse and said, "Arrest that man." And so he ended up sentencing me to 20 years. That was on June the 17th, 1975. Now, however, 15 years was something for a crime I didn't do. That was like for, I knew who did the crime, breaking and entering. And someone thought they saw me into a house that was broken into, but there was a friend of mine. He's also dead. As I say, most of the people I know are dead. But anyway, he was supposed to come back and tell the people after I went to prison to tell them that he committed a crime because there was a 2-year statute of limitation. But how can you expect a junkie to come back and tell the truth? But nevertheless, when I went to prison with that 20-year sentence, I was walking down the corridor and I was reading a book by Oral Roberts called Daily Guide to Miracles. I can see the book today as plain as it was yesterday. And I was reading the book and I came across a scripture. And it says, "But you shall receive power after the Holy Ghost comes." I said, that's it. I say, I'm trying to do something, I have no power. Then I say to myself, I used to wonder why people talk to themselves, or sometimes you have a good conversation when you're talking to yourself. So I say, you know what? If I didn't use drugs, I wouldn't steal. And I say, if I wouldn't steal, I wouldn't come to prison. So that was the way I got off of drugs while I was in prison. In fact, when I wrote my book and a story to tell, I tell how prison saved my life and Jesus saved my soul. But even before I went to prison, I went to Lexington, Kentucky, because they didn't have but 2 drug centers back in the 70s. One was in Lexington, Kentucky, and while I was there was another young man who went to Tennessee State, and they were going to give me a job as a resident counsel. But I told Dr. Wishner, I told him, I said, I didn't come to Lex in order to stop using drugs. I say I had been dealing drugs for a young man, and he shot at me, and that's why I left. Like in the West, you get out of Dodge. So I went to Lex to let things cool down. But let me backtrack. But while I was at Lex, it was during the winter at Lexington, Kentucky, and I looked out, and I saw a sign. It said the Institute of Mental Health. I said, this is a crazy house. And then it dawned on me, to use drugs, you have to be half crazy. Here you are, defiling your body, putting poison in your body, and you're paying for it, and you're doing that 10, sometimes 10 times a day, depends on the strength of the drugs. So although I knew that I was a little insane to do that, and I tell every drug user, I say, you got to be crazy to use drugs, because if you were to go into the drugstore, you'll see a sign with a skull and 2 bones. That means poison. But your body can adapt to that poison. In fact, when I was teaching school, I used to I functioned as a drug addict. I would take my drugs in the morning before I go to work. Sometimes I leave during the noonday and go home, or go to another spot. But I functioned like that for about 4 or 5 years until finally there was a friend of mine that he and I were together, and he got busted trying to break in a drugstore. And what he did, he took a crowbar and broke the front door and walked in. I said, well, he got to be crazy. And he set off the alarm, and then when he set off the alarm, I pulled off, and within 5 minutes the police was there. And after he came to me, he got out of jail, and he wanted me to go and borrow money because I had not been busted from the school system. I was still teaching. So I didn't do it. So what he did, the next best thing, what most of them do, what we call the buddy-buddy system. Whoever get to the police first or get to the lawyer first. So that's what he did. He turned me in, and that's how the police really kicked in my door. So, but thank God that I finally came to my senses, because and I tell most people, you have to have a desire to want to stop using drugs, because I have a lot of people coming to me now, and they want to know how. And I told them that it was something that I desired. You cannot stop a person from doing something that they don't want to do. So anyway, I didn't want to do it because I know, and most of us don't think about it. We put our families and loved ones in an awkward position because they love us. They don't want to deny that we're a part of their family. But at the same time, we are kind of selfish when we abuse ourselves and allow it to affect other people. Even like going to prison. I've been in the prison ministry now after I got out of prison November the 20th, 1979.
I am speaking with the Honorable, wonderful Reverend Willie Dixon, renowned in the city for the work that he's doing and the life that he's led and overcome some of the aspects of that life. And he's telling us about that, from surviving drug addiction to now moving into what he's doing for other people. So what are you doing? Or pick the story back up and tell us some other things that have led to what you're doing now, and then what are you doing?
Okay. While I was incarcerated, I was trained as a paralegal, and what that entailed was we were trained by West Publishing Company, which is they publish law books, and it was too cumbersome for public defenders to represent inmates, so they trained us to represent inmates. And so I left Rayford, which is in Rayford, Florida, and I came to Zephyr Hills Correction Institution on December the 7th, 1978. And I stayed there until I got out November the 20th, 1979. And when I got out, the irony is within 3 weeks, I went back to work in the same prison for Pasco County Adult Ed. And the person who got me the job, he was getting his doctoral degree, and he was using me and some of the information I had to work on his doctoral degree. And so I worked under the CETA program. I was making $575 $75 a month. And a lot of guys say, well, why would you work for that? I said, well, if you don't work, you'll steal, and I needed a job, and I know if you steal, you're going back to prison. So I was faithful on that job. I didn't miss a day. And at the same time, while I was there, when the men who were incarcerated, they knew that if I can get out and come back, they can do the same thing. And so within the next 6 months, they wanted to hire another person to work for a community college, Pasco and Nanda Community College. And he's now a warden, Warden James, Rod James. He didn't want the job. So I was teaching this class on employability skills to inmates. And so there was a young fellow by the name of Lackey. He said, Mr. Dixon, why don't you apply for the job with the community college? I said, they're not going to hire me. He said, how do you know? He had more faith than I did. So anyway, he said, I'll fill out the application. So what happened was I got the job working for the community college. So, and it was under a grant. I stayed there for 3 years. And but the thing about it is I started coming into the institution, and the point was I would have a key, even like now when I go to the jails. They give me a key sometime when to some of the jails, say prisons, to open up the chapel door, because while I was there at the prison, I felt like I owed something to those who didn't know how to help themselves. And let me backtrack, because most of those who were in my class, they worked picking oranges. And one day I asked them, I said, well, why do all of you seem to pick oranges? They said, Mr. Dixon, if we pick oranges, we don't have to fill out an application resume. I said, well, let me show you how to beat the system. See, there is a way that you can do it in a positive way. I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to write your application beforehand, and also to do your resume. So when you go to fill out an application, because basically all applications are the same, and I show them how to not have a gap in your employment, because if you're working in the kitchen and you're in Zephyr Hills, you just say, I was a cook in Zephyr Hills, Florida. You don't have to say you're in the prison. You're not lying. You're telling the truth. So anyway, doing this, it was a joy. And some of the people who were in my class, when they got ready to get out, I would go and try to find them jobs. I would get clothes for them, and I would take them to get their driving license. But that was under the old system. The system has changed.
In fact, I was just about to ask you about that, because when you were talking about your employment or what you were able to do when you came out, what was going through my mind is, will those same things work today? And it's my thought that maybe they wouldn't, because you wouldn't even be allowed in the system anymore. So how has it changed?
Okay, it's changed in several ways, but let me backtrack because I was on probation when I got out for 2 years, and after that I was able to get a pardon. I have a full pardon, and I went to work over in Sarasota. I taught school in Sarasota, and I retired from the school system there. But now things have changed dramatically, because what happened is this. Now in the state of Florida, and Florida is one of the few states that will not automatically give you the restoration of your rights, and that's what we are fighting now. I can't fight it as I go into minister, but I'm a part of another group that is fighting this issue, because now you have to wait from 5 to 7 years to fill out an application, and this came about in March of 2010 when we got a new governor, a new attorney general. But another thing that happened is this: they did away with the parole system, so therefore you can't get a parole, and it's sad because you don't have enough lawyers that will, because I call it ex post facto law, because if a person was convicted and sentenced before this new law came in effect, that would be ex post facto law, because you cannot punish me today for something that I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because I'm dealing with a lot of young men and women who've been in for 20 and 25 years, and they have no hope of getting out. In fact, I got a letter the other day from a young man from St. Petersburg, Florida. They gave him 80 years for cocaine. Now, that's absurd. And 30 years for shooting at a car. That's 110 years. They intend for him to die in prison. And see, that, I don't know whether you or any of your viewers have read the book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. And we always say the Jim Crow now is James Esquire, because they don't do it the same way. But when a person is incarcerated and they don't have their civil rights, they can't vote, certain jobs they can't get. But see now, and we need to teach them how to circumvent some of these things, because you have to challenge a lot of these laws. And prison is big business, because if you look at the stock market, they are prioritized in prisons. And there was a statement on the web the other day. They are on Wall Street. They're guaranteeing that the prison will be 90% occupied. And not only that, about a month ago, here is a judge, I think he's in Pennsylvania. He sent 3,000 black boys, juveniles, to prison, and 1,000 whites and others, Hispanics, a total of 4,000. And he was given I think it was $2.4 million. However, some way, by faith, they found out about it, and he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 28 years. You can go and Google it, and you can see the judge who was sentenced for 28 years. But you have to realize it's a type of conspiracy, because the judge do not arrest you. So therefore, you had to be arrested before you go before the judge, because and see, prison is just big business, and I try to tell a lot of the young
when
people.
When you say prison is big business, now I've heard some statements about that before. Give us an idea exactly why you say that. Now, here's why I'm asking. I've heard that things are manufactured in prison, so that's like free labor. I have no idea what I'm really asking, so give me the details of what you're talking about.
Okay. Let me give you several scenarios about prison being big business. You know, they use our tax dollars, and I say our tax dollars because I pay plenty of taxes now. They use our tax dollars to run the prison system. In the state of Florida, the annual budget is $2 billion plus. They make about $30 million off of the canteen. They make $5 million off the telephone. It costs more to make a telephone call from a prison to your residence than it does for a person making a call from the so-called free world from New York to Chicago. And not only that, is they do make furniture in the Department of Correction, but that is something that's frowned upon by many individuals, because you are putting people out of jobs who would not necessarily be unemployed. Now, not only that, is this. In the state of Florida, it costs about $20,000 per year to keep a person incarcerated. Now, when they're incarcerated, they're going to have to spend money for the canteen. Like I found out the other day, that they give you one roll for the men, one roll of toilet paper every 10 days, but they sell toilet paper in the canteen for $1 a roll, one of those little rolls. And for the females, they give them toilet paper, one roll every 7 days. But not only that, going back to what you were saying, who do you think pay the salary of the nurses, the guards? It creates jobs. If you go to Coleman, Florida, which is on the other side of Brooksville, you'll find out that you have more individuals incarcerated in the Coleman Federal Penitentiary there than you have living in the city. So they have people coming. It creates jobs, and once they prioritize prisons, our governor, now Governor Scott, he closed down some prisons. In fact, he closed down Broward prison. He closed down Hillsborough. It was about 19 prisons because they would not follow his dictates. And so what he did, he closed them down. If you go to Lowell, which is in Ocala, Florida, it has one of the largest prisons in the whole United States, right at Lowell. You have 4 different prisons. In fact, I'm going down in November to talk to some young boys who from 12 to 17. So it's all about the money because it costs to keep a person incarcerated. So you have these private companies. They're providing food. They're providing a lot of different articles that they need to survive in prison. And the irony of this, in the state of Florida, the black male makes up approximately from 7 to 8% of the male population in the state of Florida. But in the state of Florida, we make up from 50% or more. And it's probably more than that because there's another catch. And also to make it appear that you have more whites in prison, they label some of the Hispanics as whites. So these are the games that they play, and that's a book we had to read. I didn't have to read, but we read while I was in prison. The games people play, and you have to know. Like when you play football, you got one rule. When you play basketball, you got another rule. So in prison, it's like a game, but it is usually those who don't know how to survive in society. And so I came up with a program, How to Survive Prison and How to Survive Once You Get Out of Prison.
I'm speaking with Reverend Willie Dixon, and he's talking about the prison system, how to survive it, how to survive when you come out. That's where we left off. He's going to tell us more about that. And just the story behind the story in that situation. Okay, Reverend Dixon, go right ahead. Okay,
now you were talking about how about the business. Well, see, now the business really starts before a person go into the prison system because, our tax dollars, they're used to pay at the jail. They pay for the sheriff. They pay for the deputies. They pay for the judges, the bailiffs, the nurses in the jail. So it's a way to create jobs. But the irony is this, that I said that if several of the jails close down and these people lose their jobs, where would they work? So they find it necessary to make sure that the jails and the prisons stay full. Here again, if you read the book by Dr. Michelle Alexander, you see that she tells a lot of the same things that I'm talking about. And in fact, I believe this. Drugs are not in the black community by mere happenstance. And they're there because they know that people who are depressed, despondent, they're apt to become alcoholics or drug addicts. And then they're going to get out, they're going to steal, they're going to prostitute or whatever it takes in order to survive. So, and it's sad to say that in this country of America, that we can send a person to the moon and back, and they talk about going to Mars, and we can't cure some of these ills that we have here in this country. So I think they could. And it's about the money. This is a capitalistic country, and I just hate to see so many of our people, not only the black, but you got whites who can't afford a good attorney, because our nonprofit organization, we allow people to do community service hours. And I have some individuals that come in and they got to do 200 hours. I want to know whether they slap the governor or the president to get that many community hours they have to do. Then there was a young Hispanic young boy. He had a kilo of coke, and he didn't get with 25 hours. See, justice is not blind. Justice is just colorblind. So, but how do we help our people? How do we wake them up? And because we're in a system that and it goes back. It goes back 2 or 3 generations. When we had, if you noticed last Saturday, it's a thing that we call gentrification. We know that our neighborhoods. We used to have neighborhoods, and we always hear the slogan say it takes a village to raise a child. But where is the village? How can there be a village when there is no neighborhood? If there's no neighborhood, there's no community. Because you, at one time, you knew your neighbor next door. If you needed some sugar, you would go and borrow sugar or eggs. But now, like in the community where I'm living, half of the people I don't know. Some of them look like me and others don't. So, but back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and I say before integration, I think our people were able to matriculate among each other and survive more so than now, because during that time you could talk to. I know when I was teaching school, if a child acted up, I would see their father that weekend, and so that Monday when I go back to school, he said, "Why did you tell my dad? My dad gave me a whooping." You know, but now. If the system that we're under now, too many of the parents want to go to the school and jump on the teachers. And then now, here in Hillsborough County, we got teachers. Most of them don't look like us. They're having sex with their students that's 12 and 13 and 14 years old. So you send your, as the pastor was saying today, we're like in Babylon. And I believe this. If you go back and look at one historian by the name of Henry Torby, he said that all great civilizations were destroyed from within. Now, and how they're not, look at the Roman Empire, look at the Grecian Empire. It's because of the morals and the rectitude of the people within our communities and society. Anything goes. Because I know when you were coming up, if you took a pair of skates on, the first thing your mother said, where do you get these skates from? But now, you know, the mothers don't say anything. And I say the mothers because we know that the single family home. But even in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, when there was no man there, a husband, we still had Uncle Bubba used to come by, Uncle Charlie, and sometimes the Iceman might come by, but there was always a man. But now, after Clinton was there, a girl can have a baby, and she can be 14 years old, and she can get an apartment of her own. So here we have babies raising babies. So we have missed so much in our society. Now, some of my constituents, they don't agree with me, but I said that that integration did us a great harm. And I know back in 1950, that 3 or 4, I went into Mount Bow, Mississippi, with the late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and we were fighting and for the right to vote and different things, but we weren't fighting to marry another race into another race or going. We wanted to have the right if we wanted to go to a certain restaurant. If you want to go and use the restroom, like you said, the young lady who urinated on herself, and that wasn't irony about the woman. She wouldn't let her use the restroom, but yet she would mop up her urine. I mean, that was ludicrous. I don't know. Yeah. She could have let the girl say, "Look, go in there and take a piece of paper and then clean up," And the girl, she had to go, and she said she was like 5'6", 140 pounds. So it was humiliating. So she still carried that stigma with her today. And a lot of people carry that stigma from racism and segregation. And segregation is here. And we have segregation.
On the point of segregation, well, to your point about segregation and integration and what have you, I send out a free email once a month to anybody who wants to receive it, called the Marketing Edge. And it comes through and it says The Edge. And what it is it gives you information about what historical events are coming up in the next month, in the next couple of months, in the next year. And as I was putting it together for this month, I realized that in 1954, well, that's when Brown versus Board of Education decision came through. It will be 60 years next year that decision took place. So next year might be a good year to have that discussion again and see what improvements need to be made, or how, what has happened. And for me, why that's important is because I portray Mary McLeod Bethune. So I'm marketing my program about her contribution to that effort. And she was very instrumental in a lot of things having to do with integration and having to do with making things equal, as you would.
Now,
so next year, it'll be a good time for a discussion on that.
Well, let me say this, because this one lady, she started Bethune-Cookman College, but she was a friend of Eleanor Roosevelt, and she got a lot of things done behind the scenes. But this is another thing. We've had the march with Dr. Martin Luther King, but nothing has changed. Then we had the Million Man March with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. We are the most studied people. They study us more than they study the orangutan or whatever. But nothing ever come out of it. We have these meetings, and they're always doing a study, but there is never any follow-up of anything of any merit, because here, why have a march if you're not going to have something? When people go back to their hometown, they got a strategy that they're going to use, something that they learned while they were there. Now we, in the 60s and the 70s, we marched for integration. Sometimes I think that's the worst thing we could have done. But anyway, and everything that was integrated in Tampa, there was only 9 of us that integrated the B&B. The first time I went to jail was integrated Funland Theater on Hillsborough Avenue. But here again, we need to have a plan for success.
Stop for a minute, because I'm working with someone that we were just talking about that very event, and you just said that there were 9 people. Do you remember who those people were?
Yep, only 2 of us still alive. Jim Hammond and myself. Florine Jones was one. Grace Bowden. It was only 9 of us. What happened was B&B. The ladies would work as maids, and they would get off the bus downtown, and B&B Market was next door to the telephone company. But yet they would go in and spend their money and walk about 6 blocks to Central Park Village. Now, we said, why can we not work there if we can spend our money? So we started picketing. We picket there, and we picket Crest, Grant, and every place that we've picketed. There's some people say there's blessings and curses, but go by Crest, go by Woolworth. All of those places that we picketed, they're closed down today. They tried to do Grant, and it goes up and it comes back down, because I think that Florida and America owe an apology to the way they've treated black folks. Because now, when they treated the Indians don't pay taxes, but this is their land. But some black people were here when they came here. See, Columbus didn't discover America. America was already here. And, we say American persecution, but they didn't discover America. But I know they stole America. And like you say, it's so much that this country they got to repent. Now, although I know they weren't living, the ones that's living today, but sometimes, as the Bible says, the sins of the forefathers falls upon the children, because how can they how, as Dr. Martin Luther King would say, if you're in a race and you running from behind, how can you ever catch up unless you have an opportunity to start at the same starting line? And you know, even with women, and like I tell a lot of white women, I say you had the same problem we had. Say they kept us in bondage with the shackles, and they kept you in bondage with the wedding ring, because you know, once I went to George Washington's birthplace, and the curator, she was saying, well, they had no children. I said, that's not true. I said, look at my complexion. I said, I passed by the slave quarters. I said, I passed by the slave quarters. I said, and George Washington, he can go and pick out either one he wants, and his wife could not open her mouth or say a mumbling word. If you go back and remember now, when the voters' right, when they came out in 65, the white women, they got their voters' right after we did. See, because the male, and you should read Skull and Bones. If you go and read Skull and Bones, they don't care who is president. There is a group of people that control America, and it's not the Rockefellers. So we need to know that there is a master plan to keep you down. So you just have to learn. See, you have to learn their system. Like when I got out of prison, I didn't have but $25. I was homeless, and I sold through real estate over 250 houses. I didn't have a car. Now, you know, not that I'm so much, but I'm just showing you what you can do. And I think my three daughters, they each have a car. My wife has a car, and I have a car, and I got a house that's paid for. So I'm saying that you can live in this country, but you got to know how to function. And I would be ludicrous to tell you that every person that get out of prison can do what I can do, because see, I was somewhat successful when I was dealing drugs. I was successful when I was a teacher. So you cannot tell a person who was homeless and go to prison that they can get out and do the same thing that I've done. Now, they can do some of the same thing, but we can teach them how to survive. But no one want to take the time. Like now, I get a retirement check and Social Security check. I don't really have to work, you know, because at 82, I know I cannot carry one penny with me when I die, and everybody's gonna die. So that's non-debatable. But I try to help people who won't help, but I will not waste time to help people.
On that note, though, we have about 5 minutes left, and a couple of things I want to do is to get your information about your book out. But if it was within your power to do whatever is possible to help people or to give advice to change the course of the negative things that you see, what would it be? What's the best advice you can give at this point?
Well, I would tell them to know, I don't care what belief, and I can't, you know, it came to me today, I would not just tell them just to go to any church, because we have more churches, as Abe Brown would say, the collar got liver pills, but we have more black people that's in that environment and location that go to prison. So just going to church is not enough. You got to be a believer. You got to believe in something, you know. So I would say that they should know that, as Solomon said, and he said this is the conclusion of the whole matter. Honor God, serve God, and, you know, I'm paraphrasing, and help your fellow man. And try to live a crime-free and a drug-free life, and help those who you meet along the way. You know, because as you reach back and help one, maybe that one will reach right back and help one. Because no man is an island. We all have to live here together, and we need to teach black history, because white folks need to know our history as well as our people need to know our history. They need to know that we came from kings and queens, and they need to look at the pyramids and know that of the continent and the country of Africa. They got to see that all the things that came out of Africa, and it's nothing wrong with some music. And I ask this question: how many times have you heard a white musician or rap singer call their women all kind of names? And money is good. The only thing better than money is breath, and you need breath to live, you need money to live. But you should have some kind of decency how you earn your money. Now, I haven't always thought like this, because I wouldn't have used drugs, and using drugs. I told you what I had to do to get the drugs. But we need to start dealing with our kids when they're in elementary school, and the mothers need to talk to them while they're in her womb. She got to sing to them. She got to talk to them. I got a 3-year-old grandson in there. He can get on the computer and work the computer better than I can, because they're living in a technological age now. So we need to screen what they're doing and what they're seeing on television. And the only thing I can say is it's survive. Learn how to survive legally. That's
okay, and I know you have a book out. So, how do they get your book? What is it?
Okay. The title of the book is A Story to Tell. Then its subtitle is From Death to Life, and I say going to prison and staying out of prison. It's the story of a man who lost his way and found himself in prison. However, he confesses that prison saved his life and Jesus saved his soul. And you can go on Amazon and get the book. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's A Story to Tell by Willie G. Dixon. And I have the Revive edition out. And in this book is a blueprint to success. It tells you how to write grants. It tells you how to detox your mind and how to survive. And in here I have several pictures. You see me with the president's wife, Michelle Obama. We took pictures together, which that picture cost me $1,000. But and she was supposed to take something back to the president. I'm in there with governors, and so what I show the men that once you turn your life around and you start living as a tax-paying citizen, people respect you. So the best thing is learn how to survive, respect yourself, and respect others.
Okay, and on that note, thank you very much.